Hey folks, Mike Naso here from IPR365.com and PodWeather.com with the latest on the tropics. And taking a look out there today, when you see something as foreboding as that blob in the western Caribbean Sea, typically people get a little nervous, and there is some reason to be because Ida is once again on its way to becoming a Category 1 hurricane, a late season hurricane there in the western Caribbean Sea, headed in the general direction of the Yucatan Channel, the Yucatan, western Cuba, then the eastern Gulf of Mexico. But it should be transitioning into an extratropical system before it makes any sort of direct impact on the United States in 4 or 5 days. We'll talk about that. Now here's the latest on Ida as of 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It was at 18.9 north, 84.3 west. Winds were up to 70 miles an hour, so it's almost a hurricane again. Gusting to 85, is moving north at 10, and that's important for western Cuba and the Yucatan because the more it continues north, the closer it's going to get to actually being able to make a landfall in Cuba. However, if it starts to make that westward progression now, the closer it gets to the Yucatan. Right now it's kind of looking like in between. It'll get close to Cuba and then move northwesterly close to the Yucatan, but not quite to either one of them, and go through the channel. Now that'll give it time to maintain whatever intensity it spins up to tonight and into early tomorrow before it weakens. 990 millibars, and it is forecast to become a hurricane, start weakening by Monday morning, and then as a push of cold air and cooler waters and higher wind shear come in, that's going to allow the system to not only turn due east and maybe loop around, but also weaken into more of a coastal extratropical storm, and we'll see if that happens. Right now it does look like that will, but it could crank up rather fast in the Caribbean over the next 12 to 18 hours if an eye pops out. Now looking at the latest satellite imagery, you can see at the end there that overshooting cloud top is an indicator that the system is trying to and may be right on the verge of being a hurricane. We'll see what happens this evening, and if it does become a hurricane once again, then strengthening, the hurricane center saying up to 85 miles an hour. That's a good 10 miles an hour over minimal hurricane strength, so we'd be dealing with a potent Category 1 by the time it moves close to the Yucatan and western Cuba. Where exactly it goes after that is still, as of yet, undetermined, but right now you could see Tropical Storm Ida is bursting pretty nicely as the sun begins to set there in the western Caribbean Sea, and nasty little November storm to have to deal with. Now here's the model guidance on Ida, and you can see most of them continue at northwest, then north, and then loop it back around. Now some do take it into Florida, others Louisiana, some Mississippi and Alabama, some make it all the way to the Bahamas. Either way, you can see the general thinking is northwest, north, then off east, and maybe a loop-de-loop around. But by that time, we're not talking about a strong hurricane, although it could be a potent hurricane into the Gulf, which could mean storm surge, rainfall, gusty winds packing a wallop. And as it becomes more extratropical, it could still be like a nasty coastal storm. So we're going to have to watch this carefully. Now, the GFDL does have it looping back towards Florida and weakening, but one thing of note is that in 66 hours, it has it as a 100-mile-an-hour hurricane. But one thing you have to notice here is that look at where the eye of Ida would be compared to, say, Venice, Buras, Louisiana, Pilot Town. And look at these greens here. These are hurricane force winds, Category 1. And this model is indicating that Louisiana will get hurricane force conditions. Now that's just one model and that's just one scenario, but still, this is why even if it weakens, even if it's spread out, no eye, lopsided, looks like crap, we may still have to deal with a nasty impact from it. Now here's the wind shear on the system, and again, down here, where you see this little clockwise rotation and this very low 5 to 10 knots of wind shear, if this were over the top of Ida right now, it would already be a hurricane on its way to a major hurricane entering the Gulf, and it'd be a lot worse. But since this is to the south of the storm, instead of having winds up and around the hurricane, it's down here, and we're having them into the hurricane, or the tropical storm rather, and that is shearing it. And as it moves further up, look at this, how it goes from 20 knots down here to 70 knots up here. So there will be a massive increase in shear, and in combination with the cooler waters and the drier, cold, stable air, we're going to deal with a weakening system, no doubt. But again, it could still pack a punch. A lot of it depends on how fast it transitions from tropical to extratropical, how large it is, how much punch it packs, even if it's more like a coastal storm, and how strong it gets in the short term. If this doesn't become a hurricane and is just a tropical storm and weakens and kind of loops out here, it may not be much of a storm at all. However, if it were to, say by a scenario, quickly intensify over the next 12 hours into a 110-mile-an-hour hurricane, then even if it weakens, it's going to pack more of a punch than it had. It'd be like saying Hurricane Katrina was a Category 3 in Louisiana, but had it not been a Category 5 just hours earlier, the impact would have been a lot less than it was. So intensity before landfall does play a role in the ultimate punch packing of a tropical cyclone. You can see this little low pressure here in the Bay of Campeche. All the winds are flowing to jettison this thing on off towards the northeast, but not immediately. It's going to loop around first and then go that way, and we'll see what the impact is. But nevertheless, there's the Atlantic Basin on November 7th, 2009, and yep, dealing with Ida. Now, folks, I did want to mention to you that this will be my final video update. Stay tuned to podweather.com. Michael Moss and all those guys at IPR that I've worked with doing these things for some 5.5 years now. Keep on top of Ida, and we'll keep on top of winter weather, severe weather. I should be back up and running in a few months, but at least in the short term, this is my final video update as I depart for the United States military. So I did want to let y'all know it's been fun. I've been doing these podcasts, at least the ones that I do, since 2005. So yeah, I mean, that seems like yesterday, but it was 4 years ago, so definitely something to think about. But nevertheless, Ida in the Western Caribbean Sea, watching it carefully. Stay tuned to podweather.com and IPR 365. I'll see you next time.